going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. You know who it is by now.
Jimothy.
So ladies and gents, I am back with a quick video today because I just wanted to showcase the deck that I'm probably going to be taking to locals. What would be today when you're actually watching this video. So the deck is Mimighouls, as you can see, ladies and gents. Definitely not the final build, definitely need some refining. There's probably a few cards that are in here that probably don't need to be in here, but nonetheless I just wanted to showcase what I'm potentially going to be taking. So starting us off now, Mimighouls are really interesting. They're very fun to play. They're very difficult to play in the sense that if your opponent kind of cottons on to what you're doing, it's really difficult to push through boards or even trying to establish something, because they'll just flip your MimiGhoul Monsters up straight away and just proceed with their plays, which can be a little bit annoying depending on what kind of interactions they've had on your turn. Now I will say this build is probably missing a few pieces, a few board breakers in my opinion, but I might make a few changes before I hit locals anyway. So we've got the free dragon, free dragon. This goes without saying, this is the best normal summon of the deck, probably the normal summon you want to be utilizing the most. It searches any Mimighoul spell or trap, and the spells and traps are actually pretty powerful in this deck, so definitely want to max out on dragon. I've decided to max out on Archfiend mainly because I'm playing 3 Mimighoul Maker now. Obviously I'll talk about Maker when I get to it, but the Archfiend essentially is basically what you want to be revealing off the Maker alongside the dragon if you don't see it. So I kind of want to open with Maker. That's my whole theory behind it, because Maker is just a crazy card in of itself. So 3 Mimighoul Archfiend, 3 of the new Mimighoul Fairy, which is your biggest extender. This inclusion of this card alongside one of the other cards just helps you to play past your normal summon being stopped, which was a little bit of a problem before, because your normal summon would get stopped. You don't really have any kind of extension and you were just kind of stuck with a monster on field. You couldn't flip anything or manipulate the board in any sense. So having a Mimighoul Fairy is nice. It also combos quite nicely with the field spell, because she states that special summon monsters cannot activate their effects. So obviously if you give this to your opponent and they flip it, she activates the effect on your opponent's side of the field, and then she returns to your side, and then they can't activate special summon effects on monsters. Oh sorry, monsters that were special summoned cannot activate their effects. So in conjunction with the field spell, it can put up a nasty little bit of a lock, and it can be a little bit of a problem for some of the decks that are out there. One Mimighoul Master, again, I've seen quite a few builds online and I do agree that you don't need any more than one. He is not necessarily integral to you winning the game, but he does provide some additional power. So you do want to get him in rotation, but you don't want to see him. You don't want to use him as your normal summon basically, because he's just not as impactful as some of the other cards like your dragon, for example. 2 Mimighoul Slime, again another one of the new additions. This card's nice. It basically special summons a Mimighoul monster straight out of your deck onto your side of the field, and then it jumps onto your side of the field. So essentially gives you a couple of bodies. So it can make IP Masquerena plays really powerful, just because you can get a search, then you get a couple of bodies that you could potentially link off with. And I feel like I'm probably going to play around with the extra deck a little bit more, and put things in like, I don't know, Mech Knight Crusader Avramax, for example, just because it's just it draws a lot of attention. So there's a few things that you can do there, and it can be a little bit oppressive, especially when you compare it with some of the spells and traps that we've got in this deck, which I'll talk about in a moment. And finally we've got 1 Mimighoul Armor, which rounds out the Mimighoul Monsters. Armor's really nice. It's just an extender basically. It does have a little bit of a unique one where your Mimighoul Monsters can't be destroyed by battle, but that seldom comes up, because typically you're going to be ending your turn with a Mimighoul monster on your opponent's side of the field face down, as well as the field spell. So special summon monsters can't attack anyway, but it's just a nice little thing to have, and it just helps with extension. This one's a little bit more conditional in comparison to Fairy. Fairy just needs a Mimighoul monster on your side of the field and she can jump out, whereas a Mimighoul Armor can special summon himself to your side of the field pretty easily. And Mimighoul Slime, it checks the monsters that are on the field. So if your opponent has more monsters than you do, then it can special summon itself to your side of the field as well as an extender. But these are all really nice. The new additions really make the deck much more like feasible. Free dungeon, this is obviously just goes without saying. This deck just thrives around utilizing the field spell. The field spell is a pseudo floodgate. So if your opponent controls a face down monster, they can't normal summon, and then they can't attack with special summon monsters this turn. So it is pretty rough on your opponent. It does need to stay on field for its effects to be live, so it's not like a lingering effect even if it leaves the field, but it is so frustrating and jarring for your opponent. And if you give your opponent a face down monster on their turn, they can't flip it up, they can't tribute summon over it. They can tribute set, which is one way of getting out of it, but obviously that is just not optimal for your opponent to be tribute setting a monster. So they can't actually normal summon, so it can actually stop quite the few decks that are out there, because typically when you got a normal summon, they're going to be using that as your starter. So yeah, one terraforming, aka the 4th copy of Mimighoul Dungeon. We just want to see triple Mimighoul Maker. This card is nice. So this needs a little bit of explaining. You reveal 2 flip monsters from your deck. One randomly gets special summons to your opponent's side of the field, face down defense position. You add the other one, and then you can special summon a Mimighoul monster from hand. So it does have quite a few points of interaction with regards to this card. So you can get drawed on it, obviously, you can get ashed on it, obviously, so it does draw a lot, but it is very, very powerful, because this allows you to specifically be able to play without a normal summon if you get the right hit. It is a little bit random, but that's the nature of the deck. That's kind of like what makes it fun, just being able to special summon a monster. And when your opponent does special summon a monster, you can actually target a face down monster they control when this card is in the graveyard and just like flip it face up. So you can actually just trigger your Mimighoul monster that you gave to your opponent on your opponent's turn, which is nice because it's actually a trigger effect. So yeah, this card's nice. That's why I've maxed out on it. I want to be able to play without my normal summon, and yeah, it's just nice. Double Mimighoul Room. Again, this is the potential to give your opponent a Mimighoul monster on their turn. So this is really important to have this in conjunction with your field spell, and there's a little bit of a sequence in terms of what card you're searching off your initial searches. Typically you want the field spell up, that's just like a no-brainer. Then after that you want to be able to actually search Mimighoul Room, but that's only if you've gone through Mimighoul Maker first and foremost. So Maker's kind of like your priority, and then you can search this. And there's 2 ways to search it. Obviously you can search it with Mimighoul Dragon, which is like the best main deck monster in this deck. However, you can actually search this through a extra deck monster, which I'll get to in a moment. Next up are 2 flexi spots. You don't need to play these cards, Mimighoul Fork as well as Mimighoul Charm. These are arguably win more cards, and Fork is a little bit different in the sense that your opponent gets to choose the effect to resolve, so it's not as good as you'd hope it to be, but it does have some application, especially if you give them Dragon, for example, or you give them Mimighoul Archfiend. So Fork states that you target a face down monster your opponent controls, so you, the Mimighoul player, target a face down monster, and then you activate Fork and target that monster, and then they got 2 choices. They can flip it face up, or they can send it to the graveyard and draw, and then your opponent draws 2 cards. So effectively it's kind of like a win-win for you, but your opponent controls what they do. More times than not, they're going to flip it face up, because drawing cards is just not something that you want to allow your opponent to do. So yeah, in that sense it is a little bit frustrating. You can actually banish it to search itself, but we're already playing 1 just because it's highly searchable in this deck and you don't really want to see it. This is like the 4th thing that you would search. Mimighoul Charm. Now this is an interesting one. Obviously I just described this as a win more card, but it actually has a few applications, especially with stuff like IP Masquerader in your extra deck. You can actually build your extra deck to be able to facilitate some of the cards that you steal from your opponent. Now you do need to be set up, which is why it's classed as a win more card, but with the amount of searches that you can do in this deck on your turn and on your opponent's turn, it's quite easy to facilitate, but you need to be in a very certain position. Now if you open it, it's even better, because that's one less thing that you need to search. Hopefully you can open it with like Mimighoul Maker and just like make some plays. But basically when a monster on your opponent's side is flipped, you can actually chain this card and it becomes chain link 2. So it's like chain link 1 the flip effect, chain link 2 this card, and you just look at your opponent, well, say look, you choose randomly an extra deck monster, face down one, and then special summon to your side of the field if it can be special summoned. So sometimes I've grabbed like Chenyings in testing, I've grabbed link monsters, which just obviously just gives me just crazy link material. It does a lot, ladies and gents. So it's not the most optimal card, but it's fun. And like I said, I'm going to locals with it, so I'm not competing in any kind of regional or anything. I just want to just test out the deck and see how it does. Next, we've got some interaction for our opponent in the way of like board breakers and hand traps. I've gone with 3 Nibiru, just because it's Nibiru. I've actually gone with a purer build, to be honest. So I've decided not to go for the Kashtira package just because I wanted to put some hand traps in. Now obviously hand traps and the way that people have been deck building recently is a little bit frustrating, but the caveat behind it is you just need to be able to play the game. So you need to be able to kind of slow your opponent down from making their full board, because even rogue decks like Mimighouls, for example, just letting them make their full board, it's actually crazy what the deck can do. So I decided to go with 3 Nib just for that reason. Double triple tactics talents, which is nice. You can actually make this live on your first turn. I'm not playing Thrust in the main deck just because it just didn't seem optimal when I was testing it. I might change my mind on that depending on how locals goes. 1 Drew Swarm and 1 Magnamut. This is actually a bit of a starter, Magnamut is, because you can search Mimighoul Dragon. So if you see this in your opening hand, then you can definitely get your normal summon search for the next turn. And you can actually use it to go into seals, which is great. Sorry, not seals, spheres. So yeah. Triple Ash Blossom, because more charm is everywhere. Triple Infinite Impermanence, one of the best hand traps. And I've gone with triple Droll as well. Now, you can actually play Shifter in the main deck, but what I've been finding is if you get stopped by your opponent's hand traps, Shifter actually hinders you more than it helps, because Mimighoul Dungeon can add back from graveyard as well as deck, and typically you want to do that just because your Mimighoul Maker will just burn through resources in your deck. So you want to add the Mimighoul monsters back from the graveyard typically, and if you've got Dimension Shifter live, you're not going to be able to do that. So I've decided to put Shifter in the side. It can actually be mained, and you can actually build your deck where you just kind of main in Shifter, but I felt like it was less optimal. So yeah, that's that for the main deck, ladies and gents. On to the extra deck. We've got 1 Zeus, 1 Downed Magician. This goes without saying. It actually pairs with this card right here, which is Lyrilusk Assembled Nightingale. So you make Lyrilusk attack directly, and then you've got a double Zeus send, which is nice in main phase 2. I've decided to go for the double giant Mimighoul. You don't need any more than 2. I feel like 1 is not enough, especially for this card, because it can search the spells and the traps. It's a pseudo starter alongside an interruption for your opponent. This is actually a win con in time as well, because it does burn damage, so you don't necessarily need time cards. You can pop a face-up card your opponent controls equal to the number of face-down monsters your opponent controls. So if you've got 3 face-down monsters and I've got 3 monsters on field, you can do 3k burn damage. Yes, that's a very unique situation, but typically you're getting like between 1 and 2,000 burn damage on average, so it's really useful in that sense, and it allows your non-XYZ Mimighoul monsters to attack directly. And if you know anything about the field spell, they combine their attack and defense, so they can get pretty beefy, especially Mimighoul Dragon and where is he gone now? Armor. Yeah, so Armor gets up to like 2100, Dragons at like 2500, so they are quite chonguses in that sense. 2 Throne, you don't necessarily need 2, but I felt like 2 was useful just in case your master gets sent to the graveyard or you can't get him back into rotation for whatever reason, get shuffled away. I've gone with the 2, and I like the bounce as well. The bounce is really nice on this card, so I've gone with 2. 1 Fucho, just because you're playing level 1s. If you come up against Tenpai and they're doing Tenpai shenanigans, you just make this and just look at your opponent and just say, go on then. So yeah, 1 Fucho, 1 Access Code Talker. Like I was speaking about previously, you can actually steal quite a few link monsters out of your opponent's extra deck via Mimighoul Charm, so just being able to link up into Access Code Talker definitely helps. 1 Nightmare Phoenix, because it's back row removal, but it also doubles as removal for yourself. So a few times I've taken what's it called now, Promethean Princesses, and I've just locked myself. So so I've decided to use the Nightmare Phoenix to just kind of like stop that from happening basically, and it doubles as back row removal. 1 SP, 1 IP, goes without saying. 1 Relinquish Anima, most of your monsters are link 1. 1 Heavenly Spheres. Now this is up for contention because let me just see.
A few moments later.
So ladies and gents, this card, sorry, I just had to quickly search it. So full armored utopic ray lancer. Now I might actually put this in over the spheres or the Typhon. I'm undecided. So the reason I've thought about this card, now I mentioned this in the TYS podcast. So you can actually summon this card by discarding a Swallow Trap using a rank 4 or lower XYZ monster you control, and you can actually transfer its materials. And at the start of the battle phase, you can negate the effects of all attack position monsters your opponent controls, and you can actually attack more than once. So the reason why this card is useful in the deck, mainly because Dominus Impulse is a card which stops all earth effects from happening. So if you give your opponent a Mimighoul monster and they Dominus Impulse it, that effectively you just flip your Mimighoul monsters face up, but it will resolve without any effects because Impulse is live. So Utopic Ray Lancer allows you to just kind of like beat into some of the smaller Mimighoul monsters, and if you notice, most of their attacks apart from Master are pretty weenie, so you can actually do quite a lot of damage as well. So if you pair this with like your giant Mimighoul, for example, you can actually like almost OTK, just because you got a couple of 1000k in burn damage, and then you've got the Utopic full armored Ray Lancer attacking twice. So it is just something to bear in mind, and I'm actually going to test this at local, so I might take the spheres out. But I think spheres at the moment, just for this build, seems to be a little bit more optimal. But like I said, I'm undecided. One Typhon, just because it's Typhon. And then as for the side deck, ladies and gents, pay no attention to it. This is just things that I'm thinking about. The only real cards in here that should take note of is the Triple Tactics Thrust, which you can actually make live on your turn 1, as well as the Dimension Shifter, which you can actually side in, maybe side out the Nibs or the Drolls, which one's ever less impactful in comparison to whatever you're playing against. So yeah, and that is it, ladies and gents. That is the Mimighoul in a nutshell. Now like I said, I'm taking it to locals, so by the time you're seeing this, I'm probably already at locals playing, so we will see how it goes indeed, ladies and gents. And who knows, I might even record some of my misplays, so yeah, catch you there. But anyway, if you did enjoy this content, you know what to do by now, ladies and gents. Hit that like button, share, subscribe, all of that beautiful good stuff, and I will leave you with a little bit of an outro of me just messing around with this deck against the AI and a few lucky opponents that got to face me and just get locked out of the game. So yeah, and I will catch you on the next one anyway. Peace.